Marketer of the day, number 510. Copyright basics and mistakes. Think ahead, protect your intellectual property, and be proactive with Barbara Ingrassia. Hey everyone, and thanks for listening again. Now, if you want to manage copyright and not let it manage you, then you want to listen to Barbara Ingrassia, and she's a certified copyright manager, a speaker, and a trainer, and she has a passion for raising awareness of the role of copyright in our daily lives, because we are all consumers and creators of copyright-protected works, and understanding some copyright basics can help us achieve our goals and avoid unpleasant surprises. So, Barbara, glad to be talking to you.
Well, thanks, Robert. It's great to be with you. Thanks for inviting me.
No problem. Anytime. And so yeah, I'm really curious to hear about what's on your mind these days with all this copyright stuff. And, what comes to mind for me is I read something like just a few weeks ago. It was Martin Luther King Day. And I read something about like Martin Luther King and his family. They made sure to register things like the I Have a Dream speech. They made sure to do some kind of special copyright registration and licensing so that's a thing that can still be taught in schools. But if people need to use that speech in, on TV or movies or some commercial purposes, they have to pay a licensing fee. And I thought that was really interesting that, usually copywriting or copyrights is like a sort of a boring subject. But I found that interesting that because the Martin Luther King family did a couple of steps, now the family, they are well off, they are set because they made sure to dot their T's and cross their I's, so to speak. So, is that something that you're familiar with, or are there things on your mind these days when it comes to some of this stuff?
Well, yes, that's an excellent example, Robert. And in fact, I usually write something about it in my blog every year. It's possible to read parts of the speech, and in fact to see and access parts of the speech, but the speech is so much more effective when you hear him deliver it. And so that's where much of it is protected by licensing, so that you will rarely hear the entire speech unless it has been licensed. So yes, right after giving the speech, Dr. King filed for copyright because he was reading from notes. The work was copyrightable, even though it was being broadcast through the media. He filed for copyright almost right away because people were trying to start to sell his works. So he is a good example of someone taking proactive action to protect their creative content. And copyright exists when you have something, an original work, it exhibits some creativity, and it's fixed in a tangible medium. So notes, recordings, video. So right now, what we're doing is being recorded, and so is being fixed. But if we were just having a casual conversation over lunch or whatever that was not being recorded, it wouldn't be protected. It wouldn't be protectable by copyright.
Okay, well, fair enough. Well, that's a great story, and I love it, and I love just that they were able to make the money by knowing the rules and, like you said, being proactive and doing a couple things. And so that's a great story to get us kicked off. But what do business owners, and especially online business owners, need to know about this copywriting stuff?
Well, because we are all consumers and creators of copyrighted content, we hear about stories of people getting, a letter in the mail from an attorney who's not their attorney saying that they have infringed someone's copyright and take it down, and we demand that you pay a retroactive licensing fee and threatening legal action. That whole thing just, you see a letter like that in the mail, it just makes your heart pound. So, having some awareness of what copyright protects is important, but also because we are creators of content, we have content that can be protected and should be protected. So we need to know how to go about that. Um, and often the best answer to a copyright question is it depends. Everything is so situation specific. The who, the what, the when, the where, the why, the how, all of those must be considered. So the best answer to a copyright question is often it depends. But that's not too helpful. We do have some general principles that we can use to understand something about that gray, murky ooze that is copyright in the digital age.
Okay, great. So you always hear, yeah, you hear about those scary stories, and maybe it's happened to some people listening of getting the nasty, scary letter. But we can be the person on the other end of that in order to protect what we have. And so I'm curious about these general principles that you set up for us. So what sort of things do we need to know in general terms about copyright and about what we need to do?
Well, you're absolutely right. We could be the ones having to take the time and the money and the aggravation to send a letter like that. So copyright protects, it's the idea of protecting the right to copy. And these days, that's can mean so many things. Internet, email, scanning, streaming, audio, video. It's more than just making a photocopy. So realizing that it copyright is a monopoly that the creator receives for a limited period of time, it's an incentive so that they can make use of and make a profit from having spent time and effort and creativity. So the copyright owner gets some exclusive rights to copy and reproduce, to distribute, to create derivative works, a musical arrangement or a translation or something, to display publicly and to perform publicly, and to license others to be able to do any of those things. Copyright protects the expression of ideas, doesn't protect the ideas themselves, doesn't protect facts. So some of these works of authorship that are protected, writings, works of art, images, that's a big one that people can fall prey to, sound recordings, software, motion pictures, music, sculpture, dance, so that those can be fixed in a tangible medium. Maybe print, maybe audio, maybe video, but those can be fixed. So those exclusive rights are things that we need to pay attention to. So that we need to assume that anything is protected by copyright until we can determine otherwise. So just to make things a little more complicated, we think about the internet as being things floating out there in cyberspace, just waiting to be pulled down and used. And we say, well, the person wouldn't have put it out there if they didn't want us to use it. And I can right click and copy and paste. So the technology is there that allows me to do that. But in fact, content on the internet is protected by copyright. And just to make things murkier, one of my favorite words, a C in a circle, what we associate seeing copyright year, the person who holds the copyright or the publisher, and all rights reserved is what we're accustomed to seeing. Those are no longer required. In 1989, the United States signed on to an international agreement. We had held off for 100 years, but signing on to that agreement with many, many other countries meant that we could no longer require that copyright notice and could not require that a work be registered with the U.S. Copyright Office in order to have a copyright. So the absence of that familiar copyright C in a circle is no longer a guarantee, or it's no longer a reliable indication of what the status of the work is. So it's best to always assume that a work is protected by copyright until you can determine otherwise. Some of the things that we can do instead is we can provide a link to content instead of copying, pasting, creating a PDF. Because a link is a fact, and a fact is not protected by copyright. It's an address, or it's like a bibliographic citation, a street address back when there were phone book directories. So those things can all be utilized to protect our work, but also to protect ourselves from falling prey to nasty letters. Images are really a big thing. People will do a Google search, see a bunch of images they like, pluck the one that's their favorite, and use it without thinking about that somebody owns the rights to that. Again, they put it out there so that we could see it. That doesn't mean we can take it to use it, which seems kind of counterintuitive, but that's the way copyright works. And then you get that nasty letter in the mail that is a complete surprise to you. You say, what did I do? It was there. So that those are things to consider. Also, reading the terms of use. What are we agreeing to when we use sites on the internet? When we scroll down, way down to the bottom of a screen, which we rarely do, we'll see words like terms of use or rights and responsibilities, terms and policies. So it's important for us to know what we're sharing, what the rights are, what we've agreed to. We check, we're required to check. I've read the terms and conditions and I agree. And we just do that, boom, so that we can move on. In some cases, you don't even have to check agree. Just using the site is enough to commit you to a license, to a contract, which is something that we don't think about. We think about licenses and contracts as having to be pieces of paper and signatures and all that. So, for example, with Facebook, their terms and policies say terms you agree to when you use Facebook, the statement of rights and responsibilities. So you own the content you post, you're the copyright owner, and you can control that distribution right through the privacy settings. And this is all in section 2 of their terms and conditions. You give Facebook permission through a non-exclusive, transferable, sub-licensable, royalty-free, worldwide license to use any of your IP content, your writings, your photos that you post on Facebook. That ends once you delete your account or that information, but of course it's already floating out there. It's already been shared. When you publish something with a public setting, you haven't restricted it, it means that you are allowing everyone, including people who are off Facebook, to access and use that information and associate it with you, your name and your profile. If someone else posts your content, you can file a complaint with Facebook. But so you see that there's a lot going on beyond that clicking I agree. And these kinds of terms are true of the various social media platforms. So the internet gives us many opportunities to find information We can also be found using that information. We can also share information, which is a wonderful thing, but we need to know that other people are going to find it and perhaps use it as well. So we need to protect our content with, as I said, the copyright notice is a way to sort of, remind someone that, this is protected. Going ahead and registering it with the U.S. Copyright Office, which can be done quite easily online and is not at all expensive, creates that public record that you're claiming ownership. And should push come to shove and things have to go to court, you can sue for more money. But that copyright notice should alert someone that, hey, if I take this and use it, I know that I'm breaking the law, and it becomes an intentional infringement. So let me take a breath here and let you jump in.
Okay, well, it's great to hear about some of those rules of the road there, especially that, it's really easy on the internet to grab an image and put it back on, but just because it's easy to click and do that doesn't mean that it's a good idea to, and that in many cases, it's better to link to something as opposed to grabbing an image and using it yourself. And as far as that, the Facebook terms of usage, I heard a story a few years ago about there was some some teenage girl was at an airport and she took a photo of a plane taking off and posted it on Facebook, and then some Facebook itself or some sub company sold that as a stock photo, or they licensed it for something like $800,000. It was this huge amount of money for this one beautiful picture that she just happened to snap, and she didn't see a penny of it. And it seems sort of messed up, sort of unfair, but it was an important lesson that, well, you post something on Facebook, it's sort of Facebook's, right? Because they host it, because they put that in the licensing.
Yeah, and there have been other interesting cases of that too. Some major artworks, and sometimes what happens is not quite so innocent. Sometimes faces end up on bodies in situations that are not pleasant. So, people do things with things. I thought maybe you were going to say that the airline had complained. And sometimes, you take pictures of things and then suddenly it's a security risk. But you're absolutely right that people take it and use it. She still owned the copyright to it and could have licensed it non-exclusively to someone else. But how often do we even think to do that? That's not something that we think of.
Well, and that brings up an important point, because you mentioned that when we put, because of that, that agreement that the United States entered to in the 80s, you make something and it's, automatically copyrighted, you can put in the notice. But then you mentioned that it's a good idea to register some of that stuff with the Copyright Office. So when should we go to the trouble of doing that? Should we always do that? Should we pick and choose our battles? When should we do this registration process?
Well, you're correct. Picking and choosing the battles is important because it depends on what value you place on this particular work. Some people will gather their photos or their poems or their short stories or whatever, and twice a year or whatever, register that as a collection. It doesn't protect each photo. You can only claim infringement once on that collection, but some people do that regularly. You may have heard of the old poor man's copyright, where you put something in an envelope, mail it to yourself, don't open it, gets the postmark on it. But that really doesn't hold up in court. So this infrequent registering is a good idea. Also, you may be protected by whatever your own terms of use say on your own website. If these things have appeared on your website, that is a certain amount of protection as well. Because again, you're saying what users of your site are permitted and not permitted to do. But if there's something very special, it's a good idea to go ahead and register. As I said, it's not an expensive process. Yeah, usually something around, I think it's around $55 right now. It can all be done online. So and then it may be necessary to actually send them the physical pieces. Let's say it's a book. Send them physical piece. It's not a bad idea, and definitely needs to be done before. I think 3 years. Before 3 years generally is the advisable. Certainly trying to preempt any infringement, although it is possible to do it right after an infringement has occurred. But it's kind of a depends, and how to get the ducks in order.
Okay, that's good to know. Sort of an ounce of prevention thing, and like you said, there are these general principles, but then it's a good idea to talk to a copyright attorney of some kind, so that way they can give the solution for you. And so another story that comes to mind as you're talking here is, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the man who invented these things called jelly bellies, or like jelly beans but a healthier alternative. And something happened along the lines of, like, I think he registered some sort of either a copyright or a trademark or maybe even a patent. He registered something on a national level, and then his business partner went and registered something on a state level, and then they had to come to blows, and I think he might have even been completely cheated out of his invention. So, I mean, have you heard that story, or does that make sense?
It can be something like that, and it may have been a trademark for Jelly Bellies that was involved. A lot of times it's who gets there first, unfortunately. You can register at the state level, register a trademark at the state level, and that protects you in that state. Someone else could come out and register for the rest of the country, but with trademarks, you need to be using it in more than one state to be able to register nationally. And sometimes people with deep pockets, or companies with deep pockets, will intimidate you. I've heard of cases in which someone had local use, and then they were intimidated and had to take down their whole website, change the name of their company, the whole thing, because something large came along with deep pockets and intimidated you. That's one of the considerations about whether you go after something every time that maybe something is infringed. If you put in Google alerts to some of the unique phrases that you have used or something like that, and you receive an alert then that it has been used, happens a lot with blog posts too. You have to decide then, is it worth the time and expense to go after it? And depending on the financial situation, you on either side of it could be bled dry by postponements and that whole legal process. So it's not an automatic thing, and it's a decision that you have to make on each case. Photographers find that to be an issue. They want to show their capabilities, but chances are that it could be taken, it could be stolen, it could be used, and how much time and effort and expense do you want to go into to go after someone? Sometimes photographers then use a watermark, or they'll use a lower resolution or something. But a lot of those things protect you from honest people. It discourages honest people, and others will find a way to pull off the watermark, or pull off your copyright statement and that kind of thing. So it is kind of discouraging sometimes for creatives to have to get into this murkiness but thinking it ahead. And that's what I try to do, is to empower people to use copyright law as a tool to achieve their goals, whatever those might be, either as a creator or as a consumer. One of your goals is typically not to be sued or have to sue someone. So that copyright law, knowing something about those basics, can be tools to help you in your personal life as well as your business life.
That makes a lot of sense. And you're giving us a lot of great reminders here, including if you have a lot of images or you're a photographer, add these watermarks, have the low resolution version so that way someone can't just grab them. And this is a thing that I did years ago and completely forgot to do. So thanks for the reminder. Now I have to pick it back up. Is to do that, set up that Google alert for just a random phrase in a blog title, because it's one thing to have a Google alert for your name or for a blog post. And just to get everyone caught up, a Google alert could be like if your name is Barbara Ingrassia, then if someone publishes a new web page and it's listed on Google, then Barbara could get an email saying, hey, we saw that there's a new page out there with the phrase Barbara Ingrassia. But if someone takes your name off it or they change the title or something, then it's that Google alert doesn't pick it up. But if you just choose a random part of a sentence and add it in a Google alert inside of quotation marks, then it will look for that exact phrase if something new comes in through Google. So those are all really great things to do to, do a couple of simple steps to protect ourselves. But I'm sure that people are thinking, okay, well, now you've opened my eyes to a lot of areas where maybe I could cover my bases a little bit and do a little bit of work in order to just save tons of headache and heartache and things like that down the road. So can you tell us about where you come in with all this? What sort of training and services you provide to help us manage our copyright?
Well, you're right. I do have a passion for teaching, raising awareness, helping people understand some of these principles in this gray, murky ooze, and try to bring some fun to it along the way. So I do offer consultations with individuals, with groups, with professional groups, with businesses, to help them review their public presence, to establish some guidelines to sort of think through things, how they want to use copyright, how the permissions process might work. And then if they have staff, to be training them in how to apply these principles. But I do want to share a free ebook from my website. My website is managecopyright.com, and it's entitled The 10 Biggest Copyright Mistakes Anyone Can Make That Can Land You in Court. So I encourage you to go to the website. You'll see over on the right a place to sign up for that ebook.
Super cool. So if you're listening to this right now, which you are, then I know that you're somewhat concerned about what could or could not happen with your rights, your intellectual property, your copyrights. So you need to go there right now, managecopyright.com, to check out those biggest copyright mistakes that not just a few people, but anyone could make to land themselves in court. I think that at some point or another, we've probably heard a little bit of a horror story where either, someone comes after you and you had no idea, but then guess what you had to do is go and defend yourself in court. And even if you win, well, then congratulations, you won, but now you have to pay all these legal fees. And on the other side, it's also really scary because if you have to be on the attack, then you might go after someone. And again, even if you win that case, well, then you're out all the legal fees. So it's better to avoid that or minimize that if possible. So everyone needs to go right now to managecopyright.com. That's managecopyright.com, managecopyright.com, and we'll see you there. So thanks so much, Barbara, for giving us a lot of this. At first it seemed like it was scary and complicated, but you made it really simple for us. You gave us lots of scenarios and action steps and little homework assignments and things like that to get us on the right track. So everyone needs to do those little things to make sure they're protected. And most importantly, go to managecopyright.com. So we'll see you there. And thanks, Barb, for stopping by. So I really appreciate the advice you gave, and I appreciate the time you set aside to tell us what we need to know. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Robert.
Need more guests for your podcast? How about a podcast that's set up in the first place? Schedule a call with us right now by visiting doneforyoupodcasting.com.